coverage in the Indian media, particularly Indian television and also the Indian print media, is very inward looking. This Suhasini show is one of the few shows, if not the only show, on private networks which is dedicated solely to foreign affairs. Bharat Bhushan now runs a show on Rajya Sabha DD, which is on foreign affairs issues. So most of Indian television coverage or print coverage is inward looking, like for most of our societies. Indian print media has very few correspondents in other countries. I mean, the Hindu is an exception. We have 11 for foreign correspondents. But it's in this larger tradition of inward-looking media that foreign policy issues are covered. Now, the other shift that is happening is that while there is this corporatization of the media that is happening, the television industry in India is not doing very well. News television is actually going through a financial crisis, and there has been a shift. 10 years back, you could see larger reported stories in the Indian media, but now there has been a shift away from reportage to studio-based discussions because it's the cheaper thing to do. And there is a perception that it sells more, even though that's contested. I don't know whether it sells more, and ratings present a different picture every week. So what we are seeing is inward-looking coverage and coverage which is shifted away from reportage to foreign policy issues. So apart from logistical issues like visas and the difficulties in reporting that Suhasini pointed out, there is a there are very few channels like hers which still invest in reporting from outside, and there is, in fact, the trend is in the opposite direction. Now, it is in this context that foreign policy, I think we need to look at foreign policy coverage. Now, there has been one study done by an IDSA researcher, the Institute for Defense Studies Analysis, which talks about the impact, and she actually looked at 2611, nuclear negotiations, the race attacks, the attacks on students, the Indian students in Australia, and she looked at television coverage in the private English media sphere. And her analysis, this is a former journalist, Shruti Pandalai, and this is one of the few research papers that has come out in media and foreign policy, which is why I'm citing it here. What the paper seems to suggest is that the media does have a role in terms of short-term impact. So it works as a pressure group on negotiations, a feedback mechanism for policy. It's an aggressive participant, it's a creator of public opinion, it is a critical observer, and it is an accelerator for government decisions. But there is no long-term impact. And this is where I could just to reiterate what Suhasini said. I think the media plays an important but far from decisive role in shaping foreign policy. And in the study, she quotes the National Security Advisor, Shiv Shankar Menon, who spoke to her, who said that this is an interesting quote, who says that the relationship between the media and the foreign policy establishment is primarily a manipulative one, where they are trying to manipulate us into pushing a certain line, and the media is trying to get its story. And the media, he also says, is not integrated into the foreign policy mechanism. And I think this again substantiates the point that you're making, which is that the media is an important but definitely not a decisive actor. And the breaking news model of Indian television has actually compromised its credibility. So the policymakers may be using certain sections of the media to push a line, but because they know that certain anchors are inclined to certain viewpoints, they do not necessarily take that viewpoint very seriously because they know where it is coming from. So these were two general points I wanted to make about the limited nature of foreign policy coverage and the impact it has. I've been reporting from Nepal for the last 4 years, and I know that it's not just the Pakistanis who complain. I mean, I've complained to my editors and to the Indian media that, look, why don't you cover Nepal? Or why don't you cover Bangladesh? Or why don't you cover Sri Lanka? Hell, we don't even cover Haryana or Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh. The Delhi media covers Newton's Delhi. So in that perspective, if you look at the Pakistan coverage, I don't think the situation is as bad as it has been made out to be since the morning. Frankly, if you look at even the beheadings, you look at the national mainstream press. I went back this morning to look at editorials written in 4 influential English papers after the beheadings. This is the Times of India and Hindustan Times, which I'm citing because their reach is the highest, and the Hindu and the Indian Express, which have greater policy influence perhaps. And all of them argued for moderation. And all of them argued that this cannot be allowed to derail ties completely. So these are influential papers. And then if you go to the Hindi press as well, sections of the Hindi press are definitely more jingoistic. But the influential papers in the Hindi press either do not necessarily advocate war each time there is an incident. So the larger trend in the print media is one of moderation, which I think has not been adequately recognized in the discussions so far. If you look at briefings that are given out by MEA officials now to reporters who cover MEA, there is now a greater recognition among media reporters of the complexity in Pakistan. In the last 5 years, see the number of stories about how Pakistan is not a monolith, about how there are various forces at play in Pakistan, and the Indian government's line, which is that we must not make that there is an establishment which may still be averse to good relations, but there is a political class because you've been arguing on normalization. That briefings on similar lines have been given to media reporters, and these stories have been carried. So the point that I want to make is that the broad orientation of the print media, particularly also sections of the electronic media, is not as negative as being suggested. Having said that, let's come to the one man who has not been mentioned and who would like India to be at war with Australia, Pakistan, and several other countries simultaneously, Arnab Goswami, right? This does represent, as Suhasini mentioned, one extremist section of the Indian television landscape. Now, in the last year and a half, this is not even the highest. This is not even the channel with the highest TRP anymore. It is, as Ambassador Parthasarthi was saying, in the last 4 months, Doordarshan. Now, that is a point of view that will be expressed because it is reflective of a point of view that exists in Indian society. It is reflective of a point of view that exists within the Indian establishment. And the media cannot be divorced completely from that. So if sections of the media are taking a relatively moderate line, like sections of your Urdu press take a jingoistic line, sections of the Indian media will take a line which is hyper and which is hysterical and which is ultranationalist. So to make that the barometer for castigating the entire Indian media or allowing yourself to be persuaded that that is the dominant narrative is perhaps not correct. I mean, having said this, am I justifying that narrative? Not at all. And we critique the kind of journalism that is practiced from his channel and other channels, both on domestic issues and foreign policy issues, week in and week out. So that there is a problem with that narrative, but that is not the only narrative. The final point that I'd like to make is about social media, and I think that has come up already a bit, is that while it exposes us to the worst in each other's society and the trolls on both sides, I think on balance it is definitely a force for the positive. And the kinds of interactions that have opened up because of social media is in the last 3 or 4 years is unprecedented. And I think mainstream media editors and senior journalists have been meeting each other for the last 30 years, but the entire new generation of people are now getting to know each other, and that has enabled column spaces. The Express Tribune, for example, is giving columns to people who have made a name for themselves in the social media and who are bringing in perspectives about. He's one example. And these are people who are not writing necessarily from this high politics strategic perspective, and they are bringing in elements of Indian society which a Pakistani leader would have not encountered. And I think I would give more credit to the Pakistani media here because I don't think we've seen a similar reciprocal trend from the Indian media. We are not giving as much space to Pakistani writers who may bring out elements of Pakistani society. I was fascinated to hear about what you just said of the increase in women participation, of provinces being able to reshape curriculum. I think those elements of Pakistani society are still not adequately represented in the Indian media, and one of the things that perhaps we can do as editors, as people who commission pieces, is to find new writers and new voices from the social media who do not necessarily have the baggage that many people in this room may have of 30 years, which brings in a lot of experience, but it also brings in baggage of seeing the relationship through a different light. We've nominated Meena Menon, who is the Mumbai bureau chief, but she has till a few days ago she had still not got the visa, and this has been. Usually Hindu has got the visa on time, and while there was no overlap between Nirupama and Anita last time in 2009-10, this has been the longest period that the Hindu correspondent has not got a visa. So there was some worry in the office a few weeks ago, but we do hope that comes through soon.